How's it going, everyone? Today I'm going to be doing a 150,000 mile review on my 2003 Saab 9.3 with the 2-liter turbocharged engine. Now, I've had this car for just about 5 years now. Actually, in about a month it'll be 5 years. I've put about 40,000 miles on it since I have bought it. So today I'm going to be talking about pretty much my ownership experience. The car also obviously just crossed 150,000 miles, so I'm going to be talking about some of the maintenance I've been doing, you know, a lot of the repairs. I also want to talk about some of the modifications that I've done and just talk about the overall ownership experience and my thoughts on the car. So this car is finished in midnight blue, which was only offered for the 2003 model year on the new generation Saab 9.3. One of my absolute favorite colors that Saab has done. If you come up and get close to it, you'll be able to see it's got like a nice little like rainbow flake to it almost. It's an absolutely gorgeous color. I actually had this car repainted about 6 or 8 months ago, so this is not original paint from 2003. Instead of sitting out here and talking about the car for 15 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and hop in and we'll take it for a drive. So let's go ahead and get to it. So I want to discuss the reliability of these cars, at least my experience with them. I also want to talk about how great they are in terms of bang for your buck and what you get when you buy one of these and how cheap they are. Talk about the pricing and really just how little they're worth. Because obviously they're no longer made. And I also want to talk about some of the modifications I've done as well, like I had mentioned. But let's go ahead and start off with the reliability, because that is one of the big ones. And reliability wise, like I said, I've owned this car just about 40,000 miles, 5 years, and it's now at 150,000 miles. And really, outside of regular maintenance, of course, I've done things like brakes and transmission fluid, of course, my oil changes, everything like that. Outside of regular maintenance, there really hasn't been too much in the way of things that have broken. Now, I've had to deal with my fair share of oil leaks, all of them being common leak spots on this motor, the most prominent being things like the vacuum pump I recently just did a video on and rebuilt. I've also done the power steering pump rebuild. Again, both common oil leak spots on these cars. I've also done a valve cover gasket. It was leaking out of the oil pressure sensor, or the oil level sensor, which is down underneath on the oil pan. So it's had its fair share of oil leaks for sure. Granted, they're all easy fixes. They're also common leak issues with this car. Now, this car has never left me stranded, knock on wood, of course. The only time I have had to have this car towed was when I blew a tire, and because the car is lowered, which I'll talk about here in a minute, I couldn't fit my jack underneath the car to jack it up and swap out the tire, so I had to have it towed home. But that is the only time it has left me stranded. Obviously not a mechanical failure from the car. So there are a few common issues that can come with these cars. Obviously, I've done things like coil packs and spark plugs. Coil packs are a very common fault with these motors as well. I'll put a link up in the top corner here of a video where I talk about all the common issues associated with this motor. There's also a video I've done talking about common issues with the V6 motor on these cars as well. But I've really dealt with most of the common issues on this car outside of really an ECU failure. But if you're doing the work yourself and you know how to work on cars, these are just such a good bang for your buck car, because if you got to take your car to a Saab mechanic, it can get pricey. I mean, there's no avoiding that. Same with any car, really, any European specialty car where, you know, there's not a ton of people that work on them. It can get pricey if you're not doing these repairs yourself. But that kind of gets into my next topic of bang for your buck, because these cars are dirt cheap. I mean, I bought this car 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, I guess, geez, it's been so long, for $1,100. And granted, it did have a couple of issues. It wasn't in perfect shape, and I've obviously done a lot of work to it since in the form of modifications and upgrades, which I'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. But these cars are dirt cheap. I mean, you can find a 2.0 NG9.3 all day for under $3,000. You can find one that's in good, decent shape anywhere in the $3,000 to maybe $5,000 range. I mean, they're really, most of them are going to be in that probably like $2,000 to $4,000 range. So they're very cheap cars, and for what you get, I mean, I've always said that these cars are just, they're good at everything that they do. They're not the best at any one thing, but they're good at everything. They're relatively fast, and again, I'll talk about that more here in a minute. They're relatively comfortable, they're relatively practical, they're relatively fun to drive. Even this one has the 5-speed automatic, which I think is a fantastic, very reliable transmission. It's not the most sporty transmission, of course. It's a little bit slow when you slap it into manual mode, but for a daily driver, it's absolutely fantastic, and I love it. So I've done a lot of other videos talking about each one of these topics more in depth, so feel free to browse the channel and I guess just search YouTube, because my video is probably the one that'll come up on any one of these more particular topics. But I do want to talk about modifications now, because I spun the tires there a bit. This car has a good amount of modifications done to it. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say a good amount. In terms of aftermarket modifications, it's got a good mix of what I like to call OEM plus modifications, or just OEM modifications, and then aftermarket upgrades. So a lot of OEM upgrades include things like these seats. These are anniversary seats. These came out of a 2007 anniversary 9.3. They're pretty much better version, or a better version of the Aero seats, in my opinion. Super comfortable while also being pretty sporty, having some nice aggressive side bolsters. It's also got a newer steering wheel out of a more modern 9.3. It's got the ICM3 head unit upgrade. It's got a lot of Aero trim, like the shifter trim down here, and I painted the door panels to match as well. It's got an Aero body kit on it, like a front lip, a rear spoiler. So those are just some of the OEM upgrades. I guess it's also got Aero front brakes. That is a huge upgrade. Probably one of my favorite that I've done is the Aero front brakes. Talking about aftermarket stuff that's been done, it's got different wheels on it. It's got 18 by 8 inch, they're Sport Edition P3 wheels. I wanted something that looked kind of factory still on it. That's the whole point of this car, is to have everything that's been done to it and it still looks factory, like it came out of this way from Trollhättan. The exhaust is a full 3-inch exhaust. I had to cut out part of the back bumper, but again, on first glance, that looks completely factory and stock as well. So full 3-inch exhaust. It sounds pretty good. It's not raspy. It's still a nice refined tone. I still have a high flow muffler on there and a glass pack that runs underneath the cabin. It's also got a DO88 intercooler up there, and then it's running on some lowering springs, and it has a K&N filter. Those are just some of the major ones. There's a lot of other small minor things I've done here and there, but it's also on a Stage 3 Plus tune from Map Tune. If you want to hear more about that tune, click the pop-out banner up here in the top corner. But that'll bring the car, or that brings the car to 270 horsepower, 302 foot-pounds. Stock, this car makes 210 horsepower and 220 foot-pounds of torque. So a nice factory upgrade that's a good amount of a good power boost, but it's not too much power to where it's going to start to influence the reliability of this car. So a couple other things I guess I can talk about is the styling of this car. Is it's a good looking car. I've always thought these are good looking cars. Like, it's also got the ice block taillights on it. Those came off of the 2008 newer 9.3s. So I guess this car in particular, 9.3s as a whole, they are, especially the 2008 newer 9.3s where they did the facelift, those are still very modern looking cars. These are starting to age a little bit, but it is by no means a dated car. I mean, I just absolutely love how this car looks. One last thing I do want to touch on, I kind of talked about, I didn't really talk about in reliability, I should say, is how long are these cars good for? I mean, this one has 151,000 miles. I am filming this video, admittedly, a little bit after that 150,000 mile mark. But how good are these things long term? Like, could you buy one of these when it's at a mileage like this and be like, okay, this will be a good, reliable daily driver for me for another 3-4 years? And the answer is yes. There are plenty of 9.3s out there that are well over the 200,000 mile range and over the 150,000 mile mark as well. I mean, a lot of these cars have been daily drivers for their entire lives, so they do have higher mileage or mileage in this range. And as long as you can find one that has been well maintained, find one that hasn't been beaten the crap and that's had its service records. I do want to hear everyone else's opinions. Other owners, please comment down below so that way prospective buyers who are possibly watching this video can get some more viewpoints outside of just me, because while I do have a good amount of experience with these cars, I can't speak for the community as a whole. I think that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Let me know if you have any other questions down below in the comments. It's a great car. I I love it, and I hope that, you know, maybe I can have it for another 150,000 miles, or at least another 40,000 miles, because that's how much I've actually put on it. If you guys enjoyed this video though, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoy this type of content, because, well, my channel is pretty much exclusively Saab stuff. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.